So the Enneagram is kind of a rabbit hole with me. I can and have thought a lot about the Enneagram, especially as a writer. I have a lot of opinions that are maybe not canon or you might disagree with the Enneagram. And one of them is like, I don't believe in the wings and I don't believe in the subtypes. I just look at the triad. I think the triad is the most important part of the Enneagram: fear, anger, embarrassment. That's why I made like a character framework on it. It's so important. But then each of the types, I feel like it's actually a reaction to that. So as an example, like you have fear, anger, embarrassment. Let's pick one. Let's pick anger because I'm an anger type. So we have type 1, type 8, type 9, right? And one of them, when you feel like you feel stress, which makes you feel angry. And then that anger, do you go toward it? Do you go away from it? Or do you brace and wait? So the type 8 is the easiest of the Enneagram types to recognize. You know, sometimes people will, it's just the easiest to recognize. It's very clear. And part of the reason for that is the type 8 gets stressed out and then they feel anger. And when they feel anger, they go toward that anger. They say there's something true in that and they lean into it. And it gives a person that distinct 8 quality. Right, and it also creates certain problems, and it solves certain other problems in their life. All of the Enneagram types are coping mechanisms. They're ways for us to survive. I like to say that it's the personality type of your amygdala, right? So like you get stressed out, your amygdala, which is like a very old monkey part of our brain, the monkey brain comes on and it says like fight, flight, or freeze, right? It says anger, fear, or embarrassment, and then boom, like one of them has to be on top in order for it to be a stack. Right? So I just pick one for each character. And in real life, I think enlightenment is going, like what enlightenment means to me is you go to each type. You go to each node on the Enneagram, right? Sometimes I need to go to 3 and I need to get shit done. I need to achieve things, and the way to achieve things is to tie my self-worth to that thing. It's a great motivator. And it makes me write chapters, it makes me fulfill obligations to show up to work, things like that. They're coping mechanisms, they're superpowers. They're not kryptonite first. It has to be a superpower and then you get to have the kryptonite. Then you get to have the problems, but it solves problems first, and that's why we use them. But anyways, so we're in the anger types. We have a type that feels anger and they go toward it. We have a type that feels anger and they go away from it. And then we have a type that feels anger and they brace. So the type 8, you get stressed out. When you get stressed out, you get angry. And then when you get angry, you go into that anger. You say, I am angry and I'm going to show people. The type 9, which is the type that I am, I say, I'm stressed out and that makes me angry. But when I get angry, I run away from that anger. I'm like, I'm not an angry person. This is not an emotion that I feel ever. So when I feel that, it becomes a guilt thing. It becomes like, it becomes a whole complex. But the primary function of my personality type is I feel anger and I go away from it. If I leave anger, I have less contact with it, is the theory. Not knowing that anger stays with you. The type 1, you feel stressed out, which makes you angry. You feel anger and then you freeze. You brace yourself and you start plotting your revenge. You start plotting your course of action. You start plotting how to correct that thing. But the key thing here is you get stressed out, you get angry, and when you get angry, you wait. Right? It's the same thing with the other types. Fear, anger, embarrassment. So fear, the fear types are 5, 6, and 7. Type 5, you get stressed out. That makes you afraid. When you feel fear, you freeze, you brace, you wait, you learn about things, and that's how you conquer fear. Type 6, you get stressed out. That makes you afraid. When you get afraid, you go into that fear. You learn everything you can about it. You live every bad experience that could have possibly played out, so that if it does play out again, you're more prepared for that thing that is scary. And then when crises happen, you better have a type 6 in your life, because that type 6 is ready. That type 6 is ready and will be there for you and will sort of coach you through it and be like, I am so sorry. And they'll be real about it. My sister's a type 6. I'm super grateful. And then a type 7, which is my dad's type, you feel fear. You feel stress. That stress makes you afraid. You feel that fear and you run away from it, right? You go like, I don't want to feel pain. I'm gonna do something clever to get out of this situation. I'm gonna go somewhere that I have more control, and that's how I conquer fear. I'm gonna experience new things, and those new things are gonna teach me more than actually feeling that pain ever would. That's a type 7. You feel fear, you run away from the fear. And it's the same thing with the embarrassment types, which are just more complicated because embarrassment is tied to self-worth. I like to think of the embarrassment triad as like, these are the 3 types. Where do you get your self-worth from? Where do you get your self-worth? So the type 2, you get this is a more complicated one, right? You feel stressed out, you get embarrassed. You get embarrassed, and you wait. You brace yourself, and you sort of plan for how to not be embarrassed the next time this happens. The type 3, you feel stressed out, you get embarrassed, you go toward that embarrassment, and and you go away from the embarrassment. I got 3 and 4 mixed up for a second. You get stressed out, you get embarrassed. When you get embarrassed, you run away from that embarrassment. I never get embarrassed. I'm too good to be embarrassed. That kind of thing. And then the type 4, you feel stressed out. That makes you embarrassed. You feel embarrassed. You lean really hard into that embarrassment. It's just that the self-worth types are a little more complicated because of that self-worth axis. And maybe this exists on the other triads, but it is kind of the whole game with the types 2, 3, and 4. Where do you get your self-worth from? The type 2 gets their self-worth from being useful. This is where you get like the church event planner, right? You get somebody who I throw the very best parties, or like I'm the reason that my husband is super successful, or like I'm the one who casted that leading actress, or things like that. You get your self-worth from, like you get the sense of pride from being part of something, being the secret reason that something was good, right? The type 3 is the achiever, so you get self-worth from your achievements. What have you achieved? And this doesn't have to be awards or gold medals or something, though you do find that people who win gold medals are often type 3s because it's just a lot of work, right? And you find with the achievers, they'll do tons and tons and tons of work. They'll work themselves into the hospital a lot of the time. And now, like, their body will force them to stop working, because for them, the way that you defeat embarrassment is you just do it a lot. You just do it. I like to think of Alex Hormozy as like the sort of pinnacle type 3. You look at him, and he's like, his whole personality is a case study in type 3 on the Enneagram. It's pretty great, and like he owns it, and that's the reason that I think he's a good study, is because like I look at it and I'm like, that looks like a horrible life, but he has said many, many times, like, this is my life and this is how I like to live my life. I like to work like this. I like this. I like working 18-hour days. It's fun. That's the type 3. And then the type 4, which my ex-wife is a type 4, and it's weird, it's my first time saying that. Maybe that's why I'm so chatty today, sorry. So the type 4, all type 4s, you get stressed out, and then you get embarrassed, and then you go into that embarrassment. And where they get their self-worth from is like truly subjective, beautiful experiences. Things that only I can know, only I can experience this. Only I could have written this song because only I experienced it. I like to think of it like each type has a gift and a curse, and they're the same thing. And for the type 4, you'll hear this phrase of like, there's no one else, or there is no one else like me. And that's what makes them special, and that's also what makes them lonely. That's where suffering comes from. Because that's another thing to bring up, is like, there are certain types like the 4 or the 6 or the 9 that are associated with suffering, that are like really associated with emotional sadness, or the type 2. But like, each one of these types has suffering, because suffering is a universal constant in the human experience. And I think that there's something so interesting about the fear, anger, and embarrassment being connected to the Buddhist poisons of ignorance, aversion, and craving. Ignorance, aversion, and craving. The 3 Buddhist poisons, the things, and like, these are the things that cause suffering, right? Ignorance, craving, and aversion. Aversion is basically another word for fear. Ignorance and anger are very connected because a lot of times an anger type is going to do things without thinking first, without deciding or making a lot of considerations. So that's cool. That like ignorance is already innately tied to anger. Like it's like heads and tails of the same coin, anger and ignorance, versus like fear and aversion. They're just different words for the same feeling, for the same concept. And then I think the most interesting one is craving. The idea of craving. And some Buddhists actually just call suffering craving. And they say that all suffering is craving, which I think is pretty cool. But with the Enneagram, I like to think of like embarrassment or shame or guilt. All of those are tied to some kind of craving. And that's just so cool. And again, like each brain, this is all about the brain. This is all neuroscience, right? This is not spirit. Like you don't have a soul, in my view, right? Nobody has a soul. Souls aren't real. So souls don't weigh anything. When you get a brain injury, your soul changes, right? It's the brain. It's electrical signals that course through the brain, and the sort of geography of your brain changes your personality, changes your soul, like this idea that embarrassment and craving are connected is just so, it feels so real because all of us have all three of these things. It's just that one is on top at a time. And when we're writing characters, putting one on top every time helps that character to feel real and compelling. But one of the things that Russian literature shows us is that a person can change over the course of their life. A person can change in a really short time, but a person will almost always change over the course of their life. And so to show somebody who there is some kind of breaking point where they go from being an anger type to a fear type, that happens all the time. It really does. It's scary. And like seeing people go from fear to anger types, we're watching that right now politically, so I don't know. Yeah, that's what I think about the Enneagram. The Enneagram Guide to Waking Up is not a workbook. It's just a book. But it's by Beatrice Chestnut, who is a genius. And, oh my God, this video is 12 minutes long. I'm so sorry.